Well, we just learned a truckload of new information on the Elder Scrolls Online's plans for 2026, including new content, new systems, and a brand new monetization structure that basically flips the entire game on its head. So if you're planning on returning to the game this year, or even jumping in for the first time, this video is going to be extremely important for you to understand if it's worth it or not for you to play ESO in 2026. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here. I don't know how many thousands of hours played in ESO now over the past 10 plus years. This is a video I've been doing every year now for quite a while because ESO has been going through some massive changes, especially this year. The new release model for the game called Seasons is going to be one of the main factors for you to consider when you think about investing any time into this MMO, either as a new player or if you're thinking about returning after a break. So let's talk first specifically about what is changing with ESO in 2026. Before we jump in though, a quick word from today's video sponsor, Raycon. Now that the holidays are over, it's the perfect time to upgrade your gear for the new year so that you can better hit your goals for work or fitness while staying 100% in focus. And I've personally been using Raycon's bone conduction headphones to hit my fitness goals this year, and they are amazing. Their unique design is more comfortable because they actually sit outside your ears, thanks to their bone conduction technology, which sends sounds through vibration, meaning you can listen to your music or podcasts while still staying aware of your surroundings while at the gym or on a walk or whatever. I even use them for editing videos for hours on end thanks to their amazing 13-hour battery life, and their unique waterproof and dustproof design means they can handle anything that you want to throw at it, perfect for sweat, rain, or the beach, plus a no-bud fit that doesn't slip, ensuring maximum comfort. Raycon gives you premium performance without the premium price tag, and best of all, viewers of the channel can now get 20% off Raycon site-wide. That's an amazing deal that you don't want to miss, so just go to buyraycon.com/HTMBC to get 20% off site-wide. Thanks again to Raycon for sponsoring this video, and let's get back into it. Basically, ESO is moving away from its previous model of releasing a new chapter expansion every year to a more seasonal approach to content. For example, in 2026, we already have 3 confirmed seasons, starting with Season 0, and each one of these will bring a variety of free, yes, free content, that's important, which all players can experience if you own the base game, plus lots of other quality of life improvements, balance changes, class updates, and more. So essentially, there's no more big expansions that take years to develop. Instead, what we have now is going to be smaller releases, but more frequent. So there's that, but without big chapters to sell, as they've done in the past. The monetization for the game, or how ESO keeps the servers up, is also fundamentally changing. With that, we have the new Tamriel Tomes, which are basically a battle pass for the Elder Scrolls Online. And now there is a free version of this, which apparently will have plenty of earnable rewards, like cosmetics and consumables, and you don't have to pay anything to use this. But there is also premium versions of the Tamriel Tome with most likely nicer things to earn and more flashy cosmetics, which will be one of the game's main ways of monetizing the player experience moving forward. We'll talk a lot more about monetization later on in this video, but that, along with the new seasonal model of free content, that's basically what's changing in ESO versus previous years in a nutshell. But what if you're completely new to the Elder Scrolls Online? Maybe you're looking for a new MMO to get into. What is there to do as a new player, and where do you start? Well, this can get confusing, so let's talk a bit about the game and then DLC options. So the Elder Scrolls Online is not free to play. It probably won't be for a little while longer, but one of the advantages in today's market is just how low the cost is to get started. Right now, I believe the base game for ESO is about $20, depending on where you get it, but you can often find it on sale as well for even cheaper. Either way, this is going to be a great deal for a beginner if you're just looking to get started in this MMO. That's because purchasing the base game unlocks literally hundreds of hours of content, including multiple adventure zones, 4 powerful classes, amazing voice-acted quest lines and stories, solo content, group dungeons, 12-player trials, large and small scale PvP, and even the Infinite Archive, which is procedurally generated content, which is basically infinite. So at the lowest level of just purchasing that base game, there's plenty here to keep you playing for hundreds of hours without even looking at previous DLCs. That said, DLC does add a lot more layers to the experience with the game's previous chapter expansions like Greymoor, High Isle, Gold Road, and Necrom, for example. Each of those adds a large playable landmass, more new stories, and adventures to explore, and often new features. Right now, ESO still has the 2025 Premium Edition of the game, which actually includes all of these previous chapter expansions in one bundle. This includes the Necrom expansion, for example, which added the Apocrypha Zone and the newer Arcanist class. Then you also have the Greymoor chapter, which expanded on the playable zones of Skyrim and added mythic items. You have the Elsewhere chapter, which added the playable Necromancer class and a lot more. Each of those expansions were originally priced at around $40 at a minimum, so the fact that you can get all of these on top of the base game, priced into a bundle, it's also a really good deal. But to be fair, this is a lot of content. There's probably no way you could finish all of the ESO expansions in a year, if not more. It's there if you want to pick and choose from it, if you really want to. And like I said, it's a great deal if you want to explore the end game, have access to all the classes and features, jewelry crafting, mythic items. But again, I don't recommend this for someone new trying to get an ESO for the first time because it is so much content. Instead, just grab the base game. That's really all you need to get started. Of course, there's also the ESO Plus subscription. That's still $15 a month, and it gives you access to all the other story zones, as well as tons of dungeon pack DLCs. The monthly sub offers a lot more value, such as the monthly allowance of the game's premium currency called crowns. You can use that to purchase tons of cosmetics, like outfits, mounts, etc. Plus, you get faster progressions through some of the game's systems, like leveling, crafting. But to be honest, the biggest reason why most people end up keeping the ESO Plus subscription is for the limitless craft bag, where you can store as many crafting supplies as you want. That is a huge time saver. And playing at endgame without the craft bag, especially if you want to craft for yourself or your friends, that is still a pretty big challenge. That being said, much like the DLCs and expansions, you don't have to start with ESO Plus. In fact, I would recommend waiting a few months to see if you truly are invested enough in this game before doing that monthly subscription. Just be aware that it exists and it is a popular option with many players. But once you're in and actually playing the game, what is there really to do? Well, in my opinion, it's easiest to break things down into solo content versus group content. Let's start with solo content first. Now, as a massive MMORPG, ESO has a surprising amount of solo content, and that's due to its place in the Elder Scrolls universe, dominated by single-player titles like Skyrim, Oblivion, hopefully the Elder Scrolls 6, someday if we live long enough to see it. And now you may be surprised to learn that ESO actually has the most content of any Elder Scrolls game in history, with an enormous amount of playable areas, dozens of zones at this point. And while it is technically an MMO, you can experience almost anything in the Elder Scrolls Online, including most mainline stories, chapter expansions, world bosses, side quests, even some group dungeons and trials if your build is strong enough, by just playing solo. ESO also has added NPC companions that can help players solo more content without needing a god tier build. And in 2026, players should enjoy a variety of even more solo content, with the intro of new challenge difficulty levels getting added to Overland content. That's a new feature. And apparently even solo modes for some dungeons, including story modes, though that likely won't hit the game until the end of this year. So luckily the ESO developers have learned over the years, I think, that they have a huge audience for solo content coming from the traditional single-player Elder Scrolls games. And that's important because the Elder Scrolls Online is currently the only Elder Scrolls game receiving new content and updates for the franchise, at least for now, until the Elder Scrolls 6. And this is great because with so many solo options, you never have to wait for your friends to log in. You can always do something. You can run through pretty much all the zones in the game, completing those zone stories and side quests. Like I said, they're all voice acted, and a lot of these quest chains are very good and entertaining. I also mentioned the Infinite Archive, which players can technically solo as much as they want. That's repeated content with increasing difficulty. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is that even though you can play ESO like a single-player Elder Scrolls game, the rewards and itemization structure is still very MMO in its implementation. For your rewards in ESO, you'll collect things like armor set pieces from bosses in a zone, with stacking bonuses for equipping multiple pieces and a unique 5-piece bonus. But because Overland content isn't necessarily difficult, most of these sets aren't really powerful. And if you're expecting a big unique reward or weapon from completing a long story quest like you might get in Skyrim or Oblivion, that's not really how ESO works. You'll most likely get another set item with just a different name, but nothing that really feels truly special or unique. Most of the uniqueness in the Elder Scrolls Online comes from cosmetic upgrades, how your character looks. Some of those rewards do come from achievements and things that you can earn in game, but many of those are paid cosmetics. Again, we'll talk about monetization and whether ESO is pay to win or not further on in the video. But yeah, I'd like to see ESO improve the reward structure in the future so solo and story rewards match the time investment. But generally speaking, still the best weapons and armor in the game are going to be found by farming drops in group dungeons and trials. That's just something to keep in mind. Speaking of which, let's talk about group content next, which is where ESO really shines, in my opinion. First, you have the 4-player dungeons. The ESO dungeons are handcrafted content for groups of 4 players, and they're more than combat challenges. There's often well-designed and interesting quest lines that tie in to those dungeons and explore deeper storylines. Also, each dungeon is unique with distinct themes, enemy types, even bosses. Some include puzzles or secret rooms, hidden bosses and treasures you can find. So there's also incentive to repeat these. The dungeons and trials in ESO also have difficulty settings, including normal, veteran, and even veteran hard modes for some bosses, and this lets groups customize the challenge level and also improve the rewards at the same time. Like I said, ESO also has trials, which are the game's version of raids designed for 12 players. These are basically the pinnacle of group content that you can do in ESO. They're going to offer the most challenging and complex encounters in the game, and sometimes can take months to master with a dedicated group. The trials require mechanics and coordination, with every player needing to handle positioning, boss mechanics, and fight changes. And ESO uses the classic MMO Holy Trinity to help you take on these encounters. That's basically setting up your character as either a DPS, healer, or a tank. Now, if you want easier entry into group content, in my opinion, DPS is what I would recommend for your build or your focus. Even though perfecting rotation can be extremely challenging in this game, it requires a lot of timing, so just something to keep in mind in terms of group play. But because group content is the most challenging, it also typically has the best rewards, including the best sets in the game, monster sets from dungeons, trial sets with powerful bonuses, and also a large percentage of achievement-based rewards like unique skins, mounts, personalities, and even titles come from group content in the Elder Scrolls Online because it is the most challenging to complete. No matter what you do or how you like to play ESO, one of the main things that you'll be doing is obviously combat. This is one of the most debated topics, though, in the game by far that I've seen. So ESO uses an action combat system that you're actively selecting your targets, doing basic attacks, moving, blocking, dodging, and using your ability. Now, most skills in the game do not have cooldowns, so you can cast what you want whenever you want to, as long as you have the resources to do so, specifically stamina or magicka. A big part of the combat system is sustaining those resources so you don't run out and have to stop using your abilities. This is honestly what I like the most about ESO, combat plus theory crafting and build options that allow for you to express a unique playstyle. I've made hundreds of unique ESO builds on this channel and over on my website, hacktheminotaur.com, because there's just so many options that you can do in this game. That said, though, ESO combat is not for everyone, and a frequent complaint is that it feels floaty and less impactful compared to like Skyrim or Oblivion, and I think that's fair, but for me, the fluidity and the skill variety definitely makes up for that. Now, in 2026, the Elder Scrolls Online has started a visual overhaul of its combat abilities, starting with classes like the Dragon Knight and the Two-Handed skill line in an effort to modernize the look and feel of the game. I think the frequent comment that the game's combat skills feel floaty and without weight seems to have finally been noticed by the development team, and it sounds like the work has already begun to make combat feel more impactful, but we'll likely need to wait until the end of 2026 to see if those changes truly shake things up or not. Note that ESO also has a first-person mode that you can jump into at any time, like Skyrim or Oblivion. You can even play first-person mode for combat, but I wouldn't recommend it for most combat situations. You do want peripheral vision for dodging, avoiding ground-based effects, and other MMO-style mechanics that you don't typically need to worry about in the single-player games. Also, another potential barrier to combat entry for new players is ESO's weapon swapping system, which again, just another reminder that the Elder Scrolls Online is an MMO because it uses weapon swapping. Basically, this means you can have 2 different weapons equipped on your character, and each of those different weapons can have their own skills, a set of skills attached to each weapon. Then you'll get 5 skills and 1 ultimate per weapon, so 10 skills and 2 ultimates total, but you have to swap weapons to use that other set of skills. Because skills in ESO can be queued up in advance, and there can be a lot of nuance here when it comes to swapping to your alternate weapon at exactly the best time to fire off your next skill on the next weapon, and then swapping back and so forth, which adds depth and complexity. But again, this is not for everyone. Many ESO players actually dislike the weapon swap mechanic in this game, and you can still play as a 1-bar build without swapping weapons if you want to, thankfully. You will be limited, obviously, to half the skills, but you can make it work, and ESO even has item sets that support this playstyle, like the Oaken Soul Ring, which is very popular. This mythic item limits you to using just one weapon, but it gives you a ton of passive buffs for doing so. But if you're concerned about the combat here, my advice is pretty simple. Try the base game for a few days, see if you like the combat or not. The combat doesn't fundamentally change from level 1 to max level. You just unlock more skills, passives, and gear along the way, so it's pretty easy to know if this style of combat is for you just by jumping in and trying things out. Speaking of which, the Elder Scrolls Online does frequently have like free-to-play weekends. These are going to be a perfect opportunity to test things like that out. If you're worried about how the game plays versus like your single-player experience, definitely look for those free-to-play weekends as a means of testing out the game before you start to dive in. But another major plus or minus potentially for the Elder Scrolls Online, depending on your taste, is going to be builds and theory crafting. Like I said, this is one of my favorite aspects of the game, but it's not for everyone. With 7 classes now, hundreds of skills at this point, plus the introduction of subclassing in 2025, which lets you actually mix skills from different classes onto your build, plus over 500 plus item sets now, the possibilities for ESO in terms of how you craft your character are pretty much endless at this point. In 2024, ESO also added the scribing system, which is a simpler version of spellcrafting from the previous Elder Scrolls games that lets you customize your own skills. ESO even has a built-in armory system that lets players store builds and instantly respec, which is perfect if you want one main character. And in 2026, the game will let you respec your choices for skills and attributes on the fly without having to return to town or use a respec scroll. So the game does encourage you to experiment, but at the same time, the amount of choices here can be extremely overwhelming for a new player. While it's not required, I do recommend you at least browse through some builds online once in a while just to get ideas for what works well in the game. Yeah, you can craft your own build, of course, but having some ideas of where to start, especially I think for newer players, will actually help you enjoy the game more without getting bogged down with all the details. Now, I do have beginner builds and leveling builds for every class in the Elder Scrolls Online over on my website. That's, again, hacktheminotaur.com. Those will serve as a great starting resource. Speaking of which, I really love leveling up new characters in ESO. It's one of my favorite things to do, even 10 plus years later. The way that your character progresses through the skill trees just feels fun to me, and it's pretty fast progression as well. Now, the base level cap for the game is 50, which you can probably hit in a week or even a few days if you play the game a lot. After level 50, your character moves into champion points next, with a maximum CP level of 3,600, so you won't hit that level cap anytime soon. But the thing is, champion points are account-based and not character-based, so if your main character is at CP 500 and then you decide to make a new character, they start out at character level 1, but they can immediately use all 500 champion points for some extra power. It does make leveling alternate characters much faster and more fun. Champion points are basically like additional stat bonuses, like more single target damage, better AoE healing, or better defense. These are all small bonuses that slowly add up over time, so you can progress your characters in this game for literally years on end. And another part of that obviously is gear. In terms of gear, keep in mind that weapons and armor and jewelry for the Elder Scrolls Online, those drop at your current level up to the gear cap of champion point 160. This means that there's no point in farming gear really as you're leveling up until your character hits that CP 160 limit, because you'll want all your gear pieces at that level cap for the best possible stats, and items that you pick up before CP 160 will actually have worse stats. So when I level up a new character, I usually use random gear piece that just drop from monsters or I get from treasure chests or whatever, and then I don't really worry about my gear until I reach CP 160. Now, a downside, I would say, or at least something to be aware of with ESO, is balance. Now, as an MMO with frequent updates, this is very different from a single player game. There are tons of balance patches, typically every quarter or basically every 3 months. Skills get buffed and skills get nerfed. Item sets can change. Even the set that you farmed for hours might be adjusted later on, maybe 1 year or 2 years down the line. Now, this isn't unique to ESO, but the meta in this game shifts constantly, basically every patch. So if you want the absolute best DPS and top meta builds, you'll need to adapt your build constantly. That's why I don't really recommend chasing meta for most players. For the majority of ESO players, you can just play how you want and be totally fine. But if you only want the best possible build, expect that that build is going to get nerfed or change eventually, and you'll have to update your character every 1 to 2 patches. But that brings us to the topic next of, is ESO pay to win? So something to be aware of, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you, is that ESO does have an extensive cash shop, probably one of, if not the most monetized MMOs on the market right now that's not a free-to-play MMO. You have the usual, right, with costumes, outfit styles, weapon styles, but also personalities and skill styles now, which change how your skills can look. Even things like fast travel and harvesting animations have monetized versions that can look better. And then, of course, you have expensive mounts, and you also have an entire housing system, which players can dump hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars into. Now, luckily, nothing that I mentioned here actually gives you gameplay power, so nothing there is pay to win. You really are only paying for cosmetics or sometimes convenience, which I think is fine. Still, you also have the Crown Store, which I think can be a rough experience, especially for new players, because you might be tempted to buy something here that you didn't realize you could get for free in-game, like respec scrolls, food buffs, experience scrolls, for example. Now, the ESO team has committed to improving this in 2026, but still, especially when it comes to the Crown Store, I recommend doing your research before buying anything, especially if you're like using the Crown Alliance that you get from subscribing to ESO Plus. However, the bigger issue here with monetization, in my opinion, is loot crates, because these are 100% gambling. If you want something like a nice Apex mount, for example, you can spend a lot here trying to chase down that drop. There are some systems in place like Crown Gems, but the premium chase is still there. And while we still don't know the extent of the Battle Pass coming in 2026, which I mentioned called Tamriel Tomes, these, I assume, will have a lot of great cosmetics that players can get without the gambling, which I think is a good alternative. You know you'll actually get something because it's on the pass. You just have to work towards it. But I still imagine that those gambling crates will have the best looking items, and that's still going to be a thing moving forward. Now, there's also the question of whether DLCs in ESO are pay to win, and that actually is changing quite a bit in 2026 too. And this was surprising to me, but it's actually great news for new players, especially beginners. So that's because most of ESO's past chapters are slowly getting rolled into the base game experience completely for free. Now, we already know of several of these getting added to the base game in 2026, including the Thieves Guild DLC, Dark Brotherhood, Orsinium, Imperial City, and Greymore confirmed. Greymore is big, for example, because that DLC added the Antiquities system, which allows players to create mythic items like the Oakensoul Ring and the Pale Order Ring, which are actually huge in terms of player power. Also, moving forward, the devs have committed that all new content coming to the game, even classes, new weapons, those are all going to be free moving forward with the new seasons system. So basically, the value for owning the base game of ESO is increasing, which is a good thing, again, for new players especially. In terms of community, we talked about how ESO can be played solo for hundreds of hours, and that's totally a valid way of playing, which many people enjoy. But if you do want to do the hardest dungeons, trials, PvP modes, you'll want to join a guild and start making friends. ESO has a lot of great people who will teach you the mechanics that you need to know and help you improve. There's whole guilds that do that. There's also an in-game guild finder and activity finder to help you connect with other people and with groups. And you can join more than one guild at a time, which is great too. So of course, ESO has that social aspect that I do recommend if you're interested. If that's your thing, definitely try to get involved with other players. And if not, keep playing solo, and that's fine too. But with all that said though, is ESO worth playing in 2026? In my opinion, well, I actually have two answers for this. And of course, that depends on what type of player that you are. For new players, I can say that ESO is 100% worth getting into now. But that's because there's literally hundreds of hours of content available now, with more becoming playable in 2026 through freed up DLC with some absolute bangers confirmed for this year, like Orsinium and Dark Brotherhood. Like I said earlier, the barrier to entry is extremely low now, being just the base price of the game, often $20 or less, especially when you get the game on sale. And with new content coming in 2026 also being 100% free, you also have the Tamriel Tomes Battle Pass, which has a free track where you can earn lots of cool rewards and cosmetics, again, completely for free. There's so much that you can do this year with spending very little money. It's honestly a great value. And yeah, there is the Premium Battle Pass, which you can pay for if you want, which will offer more cosmetics. And then you have the ESO Plus subscription if you really want to commit to the game. But for new players, you absolutely do not need either of these things to play. And so your overall cost to start and actually see if you like the game, it's a very low bar. I personally, again, would wait on ESO Plus until you've reached at least the champion point ranks and maybe played for a few weeks to see if you're really committed before investing in that monthly subscription. Now, for returning players, the value of ESO in 2026, I think it's a different story. It's actually changed quite a bit compared to previous year's content. That's because without chapters and dungeon packs now, the game is receiving less new content overall. That is for sure. For 2026, the main new content we have confirmed so far is a PvE group or challenge zone called the Night Market. We have a new trial called Crimson Veld coming. A few other unknown elements still, like the Sage's Vault, something also involving ships called the High Seas of Tamriel, which sounds a bit hit or miss, honestly. A lot of this new content the devs have called experimental, so it may even not be fully developed when it comes out, or it might be released in phases or pieces. And with their previous content being the Writhing Wall event at the end of 2025, that definitely had some issues. So this is concerning to me, especially if they don't stick the landing on these new content, experimental content drops, or whatever they're called. And of course, we also have the new Tamriel Tomes to explore, which might be fun to progress through. You can do the free version there, like I've said. Plus, there are lots of new class updates. There's a new werewolf update. There's new overland difficulty challenge modes coming to explore, but none of that is technically new content. So overall, for returning players who've already played through the existing chapters and all the DLCs, this year I think feels light and more casual, I'd say, compared to previous years. So I'd say this is definitely a new phase, a new era for the Elder Scrolls Online. If you're a returning player, will this be enough to bring you back? I'm not sure that it will be. Again, all the new content is free and you can jump in anytime. So that is, and the devs could pull off something genuinely surprising and amazing with some of this new content. I personally cannot wait to see what's coming next, but let me know what you think about the Elder Scrolls Online down in the comments section below, and thanks again for watching. Hey everybody, just a quick note that we are still rolling out members-only builds and guides for our Tier 2 channel members here called the Elite Squad, including our updated unkillable Magicka Arcanist. This one is all about mixing damage with insane survival. We're talking over 100k in active and passive damage shields so that you can survive anything that you need to solo. It's also extremely easy and fun to play without even requiring trial sets or mythics. And we now have a subclassing version for this one, mixing in some Magicka sorcerer abilities, which makes it even stronger. And that's just one of dozens of members-only builds and guides that you can unlock when you become a channel member. We also have the Stamina Necromancer Death Knight build, which combines massive AoE damage, healing, and sustain. The Golden Saint build for the Stamina Templar, which combines fire and holy magic. And a unique Druid build that I mentioned earlier, which is also incredibly strong and fun to play. All these builds offer truly unique and off-meta playstyles that basically feel like you're playing a completely new class in the Elder Scrolls Online. And if you'd like to support the channel, it really is the best way to do that because you get a truckload of bonus content, not to mention early access to videos and members-only Discord. Just make sure to select the Elite Squad option if you're interested. And to get started, click the join button down below or the membership link in the description to see our full list of members-only builds and guides. Huge shout out, as always, to our channel members who make this channel possible. Could not do what I do without you, so thanks again. Thanks to all of you for watching this video, and I will see you around in the next one.